Joe sends this. Joe, my editor with the mostest, sends this, and it really turned my head because, the Afghanistan papers were published by the Washington Post, which, first of all, a lot of people are speculating, why did the Washington Post publish this? They're in bed with the CIA. Why did they publish this? For anyone who did not get a chance to check that out yet, the Washington Post published these Afghanistan papers that pretty much just straight up confirm something we already knew, that we have been lied about. We have been lied to about the Afghanistan war since day one. I know you're shocked. I know you're like, Ron, really? The United States would do a preemptive war? The United States would enter us into a war that wasn't winnable, that we had no reason being in, that there was no reason for it to happen whatsoever, and they would just lie about it to make it happen because the military-industrial complex is a scam that's getting rich off of our lives? Yes, that has all been confirmed, in case you had any doubt. So anyway, that was all published, and now they're saying some people ought to stand trial for this, and I agree with them. So here, let's get to the headline here. Let's bring Rumsfeld in. So Ro Khanna calls for hearings on U.S. officials who lied to American people about endless Afghan war. So here's the quote. The bottom line is that top military officials and civilian officials have known that the Afghan war has been unwinnable and have been misleading the American public for 20 years. I mean, isn't this shocking? You just define a war by some concept that's ongoing, like terrorism. We have a war on terrorism, and it doesn't work out. Isn't that shocking? Shocking that when you just designate this war against this abstract, terrible thing, you don't win. That's interesting. That's interesting. And then you just kind of go, we're going to invade all these countries. Ugh. All right, so Representative Ro Khanna on Wednesday said that the Washington Post's explosive investigation, the Afghanistan papers, showed the need for a congressional hearing, and that former Pentagon Chief Donald Rumsfeld should be among the current and former top officials called in for a reckoning before the American public. Publicked. That's a verb of sorts. All right, so Khanna made the statements at a House Armed Services Committee hearing. He began addressing Secretary of Defense Mark Esper by summing up the Post report from Monday. And so here's that quote again. The bottom line is the top military officials and civilian officials have known that the Afghan war has been unwinnable and have been misleading the American public for 20 years. Isn't it amazing? 20 years. And amazing is not the right way to put it. But 20 years, nearly 20 years, we have been in this war. We are in Afghanistan. Nobody knows why. Well, we do know why. It's for resources. And it's so blatant. That's why we're there. Donald Trump even said it. He even said it at one point. He was like, we're going to stay in Afghanistan until we get their resources, right? And then people were like, whoa, you don't say that. I mean, yeah, that's totally what we're going to do. But you can't say that. You're not supposed to be totally upfront about what our military-industrial complex is doing. You're not supposed to be upfront about the fact that this is just about exploiting resources around the world, and this is about profiteering via war, which, by the way, Smedley Butler summed that up for us in the 30s via the book War is a Racket. Nothing's changed. Nothing has changed. But you're not supposed to be upfront about that. Come on, Donald. You got to be subtle. Okay, so here's what Esper have to say. Esper said it was up to the committee on whether or not to call a hearing, but I do know this much, said Esper. The story spanned multiple administrations, multiple uniformed and civilian officials, and I think it's good to look back. Yet, Esper said, I think at this point where I'm looking is forward, and forward tells me the path to success, the win, is a political agreement between the parties on the ground. But don't you think we have to have some accountability so we don't make the same mistake again, asked Khanna. I like Esper. Esper has some great logic here. It's in the past. It's in the past, so why should we do anything about it? I mean, I think we just need to look forward. That makes a lot of sense here. Hey, there have been a bunch of war crimes committed, and our politicians lied us into this illegal war. And now we have more to work with because of these Afghanistan papers. It's time. It's time for justice. But it happened in the past. I don't know. I mean, it's Come on, that was then, this is now. We gotta start thinking about the new Afghanistan. What's Afghanistan looking like now? How do we agree on the ground? That's what we got to focus on. That's the key to success. Not going after war criminals like Donald Rumsfeld or George W. Bush or Dick Cheney. Let's look forward. Come on, Ro Khanna. Don't be a buzzkill this holiday season. What are you doing? Huh? If we don't learn from history, everybody gets to stay in Afghanistan. Isn't that how the saying goes? Right? That's how the saying goes. If we don't learn from history, we get to stay there. So we'll see what happens here. And some of you guys have responded and be like, no, let's not end with Rumsfeld. Let's get them all in there. Let's get Cheney. Let's get Bush. Let's get everyone. I'm with you. Absolutely. I think Rumsfeld's a good place to start. I think that's a good starting point, is Donald Rumsfeld, because that guy was kind of like, I guess in many ways, the nucleus of it all. I guess actually, if you had to start somewhere, and you know, and I know again, this is all kind of like in response to what's available right now, as far as, okay, this is the paper we can point to, and we're bringing this person in because of it. I know it's all kind of in response to that, but I think in the most perfect scenario, the first person you would get is Cheney. I think Dick Cheney. I think in many ways that guy, along with like all of his shares in Halliburton, that dude was the big architect of this thing. He didn't work alone, obviously, and they all had a hand in it. Powell, Rumsfeld, Cheney. I think Bush in many ways was just the puppet. I mean, he went along with it. He was fine with it. He's a war criminal who should be in jail. But I think in many ways he was just the puppet for the rest of them. Why? Because he was the least intelligent out of them. I mean, the rest of them were diabolical and scheming and knew what they were doing, which was evil stuff. And they knew that. Bush was cool with the evil stuff. He has no moral compass. He's just not that bright. George Bush was genuinely not that bright of a guy. I mean, how do you fail up your entire life and wind up president? If you're George W. Bush, that's how. And he was probably the worst president in the history of our country. Definitely in the top 2. It's interesting to me. I mean, the one thing I'm hoping that all this brings to the surface, I mean, other than trials and people getting thrown in jail, which I'm not going to get my hopes up for that, but fingers crossed, right? Is that some people will start to remember what the Bush administration really did, what they were really like, and this rehabilitation of people from the Bush administration will end, because it is so sickening. It is so sickening that the Bush administration, we've rehabilitated the Bush administration. When you hear Nancy Pelosi, oh, I yearn for the days of George W. Bush, where they lied us into Afghanistan and lied us into Iraq, lied us into illegal wars, gave us the Patriot Act, brought this country to its knees, gave these horrible tax cuts that Obama then continued. Oh, I yearn for those days, says Nancy Pelosi, and we're rehabilitating all these criminals from the Bush administration. And they're part of the resistance, baby. Richard Painter, all these ridiculous characters from the Bush administration. Oh, they changed now because they talk nicer than Donald Trump. Maybe stuff like this getting published will help people remember. As Gore Vidal says, we live in the United States of amnesia. I think in many ways that's true. But maybe people will start to remember. This is what the Bush administration was. It was the most repulsive administration maybe ever in the history of this country. Let's not rehabilitate these war criminals, because, what the age-old saying really is, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. That's the age-old saying. So we'll see what happens here. I applaud Ro Khanna for bringing this up. I'm glad that people are making some noise about this, and we'll see if the committee can get any hearings in. It would be amazing to see Donald Rumsfeld in court, and hopefully they all deserve to be in jail. I mean, that is the biggest understatement I've made so far this year. It's got to be that Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, George W. Bush, they all deserve to be in jail. So we'll see what happens here. I'm certainly not getting my hopes up. The military-industrial complex is a strong beast, And, when it comes to the military-industrial complex, well, most Democrats and Republicans alike are complicit with it. So we'll see. But, Joe, thank you for sharing that. And we'll keep an eye on this. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your